All right, good evening. This is Mottek On Money, number one for your business and consumer news here on Talk Radio 790 KBC. I'm Frank Mottek, and we are doing it live right here, weeknights in the 5 o'clock hour in the heart of drive time here in Los Angeles. Mottek On Money 5 nights a week for you, live on the air here on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And, of course, the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast for you at kbc.com, Apple iTunes, all your favorite podcast platforms, and we're on the socials, too, at Frank Mottek on X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram, slowly getting onto Threads as well. Well, a solid start to the new week on Wall Street. Nervous time on Main Street. Stocks finishing with nice gains today, producing the best day for the Dow since mid-June. Investors still focusing on earnings and rising government bond yields lately. The Dow coming in for a closing gain today of 407 points. The Nasdaq moved higher by 85, and the S&P 500 gained 40 points. Last week, we saw a rough start to the month of August, with the Dow down 1.1% for the month. The S&P, or for the week, I should say, the S&P 500 down 2.3% last week, and the Nasdaq gave back nearly 3% for the week. Well, we did see buying today accelerating on the latest earnings reports. We did see Tesla coming in lower today, down 1% after Tesla disclosed that Zachary Kirkhorn had stepped down as chief financial officer at the company. Shares of Yellow Corporation, that's a big trucking company, moving lower after the company did file for bankruptcy over the weekend. Usually the stock had rallied. Unusually, I should say, the stock had rallied last week ahead of the expected announcement. That had been the buzz, and sure enough, they did file for bankruptcy, and the stock ended lower by 30.5% today. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway shares moving higher after the company announced it swung to a profit in the second quarter thanks to its investment portfolio and insurance holdings. Berkshire Hathaway, the most expensive stock, Class A shares, most expensive on the New York Stock Exchange. We'll take a closer look at that coming up. Taylor Swift continues to be an economic engine here in Los Angeles, continuing her 6-night tour in L.A., bringing thousands of fans and a big economic kick to the area. And, of course, we're watching crime and homelessness, two big issues impacting businesses here in L.A., as well as every Angelino. Coming up later this hour, two of the most qualified guests to speak on those issues, the Reverend Andy Bales, CEO of the Union Rescue Mission in downtown Los Angeles, and Skid Row will be joining us. And the Honorable Dennis ZINE will be with us on the latest smash-and-grab incidents at retail stores. Store owners are fighting back. Also, some city workers are about to go on strike. So we'll have some big conversations on the big issues impacting you this evening. The Honorable Dennis ZINE, former L.A. City Council member, longtime LAPD sergeant, and still an LAPD reserve officer with about 55 years of service to the City of Angels. Looks like we might have a city strike tomorrow, with more than 11,000 L.A. City workers initiating that one-day walkout throughout the city. So it remains to be seen how that's developing as the hot labor summer continues, along with the writers and actors on strike. We will have a city strike, at least a one-day strike for tomorrow. But first, on the money, the markets, the economy, joining us live now, a giant in the business world, the one and only Steve Forbes, CEO of Forbes Media, including Forbes Magazine, former Republican presidential candidate, author of numerous books. His latest, Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Steve Forbes, thank you very much for taking the call here, and certainly inflation, a big issue on the picket lines here for the hotel workers, the writers, the actors, and really everyone here that's struggling to make it here in Los Angeles. Give us an update on how you see things here at the moment.
Well, the rate of inflation has come down, but that shouldn't blind people, and it doesn't, to the fact, even some politicians don't want to acknowledge it, that still means prices are going up. You've noticed gasoline prices are starting to move up again. Commodity prices are starting to inch up again. So the inflation beast is out there. And we've had about a 20% increase in prices in the last 2.5, 3 years. And so people are trying to catch up in terms of wages. Whenever you have inflation, you always have more labor unrest, more strikes, more walkouts, harder contract negotiations.
Certainly, and it's really hot this summer, especially with workers in so many different sectors actually going out on strike or obviously demanding more pay, and a very difficult economic environment here, with especially for housing, with homelessness already at an all-time high here. So how do you see all these labor battles playing out in this tough environment here?
Well, I think you're going to see employers forced to make some settlements that enable workers to begin to catch up. That, of course, is going to raise expenses, so there'll be more pressure on prices. So, of course, if you don't have the inflation in the first place, you don't have the problem. So we're going to be living with the aftermath of the inflation for a while as things settle down from these huge increases in the cost of living. Fortunately, we avoided a strike with the UPS, but unfortunately, the Teamsters Union, for reasons of their own, have decided to let Yellow Motor, and that's 30,000 employees, go down. You mentioned earlier that they filed for bankruptcy, and they could have made a settlement. They could have made an agreement that would have given that company, which had made some mistakes, a chance to get back on its feet. But the Teamsters head wants to show the world he's tough. He's going after his big target is Amazon and more FedEx. And so whatever the reasons, you're going to see a lot of more labor strife.
Does this remind you of the 80s when we did have, for example, that situation where the machinist struck Eastern Airlines and got to the point where Eastern had to go down?
That's right. And you especially saw it in the 70s, but even in the 80s, as you mentioned, when the inflation had been conquered painfully and the economy was starting to boom again, the aftermath of the inflation will be with us for a while, and you'll see strikes.
Certainly, and looks like a Fitch ratings service downgrading Uncle Sam's credit rating, and certainly the way the federal budget's been handled in Washington, very much in focus here. What is Fitch seeing that so many others are not seeing, and what's your reaction to Uncle Sam's credit rating being downgraded, and also P.S. the credit ratings for the mortgage giants, Fannie and Freddie, also being downgraded last week?
Well, in terms of the downgrade of the federal debt, the market greeted it, to be blunt about it, with a yawn, and you saw how the market what it did today. And but what Fitch, I think, did underscore, even if you didn't buy all of their reasoning, and some of it was not AAA, some of their rationales, but they make a point that the U.S. government is behaving irresponsibly, and the time is going to come when you're going to have a crisis on the debt, because the private sector is going to not want to buy more of it. Deficits are going to be going up very, very sharply. Even this year, revenues are not coming in the way the government anticipated, so they're borrowing more. So at some point, that means the Federal Reserve is going to be buying debt. And how does the Federal Reserve pay for those bonds? They create money out of thin air, and we know where that leads. So Fitch, short term, not much of an impact, but longer term, pointing out we cannot continue on the course we're on. But what we must avoid, though, is dealing with our government recklessness. We must avoid raising taxes and doing unnecessary destructive things on entitlements. So there's a positive way of dealing with it and an unpositive way of dealing with it. And I hope we take the spirit of Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s, when a lot of positive things were done. So when we came out of the inflation, the economy roared ahead.
I do remember those days, and you're absolutely right. And remember, Social Security was a big issue back then in the 80s when it looked it was going to be running out of money. And people like Claude Pepper back then in Congress worked with the Republicans to come up with a system so that Social Security would be safe, solvent, and secure for the next 75 years. I remember that phrase being used back then. Do you think we're going to have any movement, any bipartisan movement, to finally get a handle on what's happening there with this federal budget and what $32 trillion in debt at this point? At what point will it become an issue?
Well, in terms of the 75 years, I love that. It's fun to make those predictions when most people aren't going to be around 75 years from now to see if it came true. But they did come to a Social Security compromise. Unfortunately, I don't think what they did then is going to work today. That is, they raised gradually the payroll tax, raised gradually the retirement age. What I think you're going to eventually see happen, though, especially if we get this economy moving again, which we can with some reforms, just as we did in the 1980s, when you have a more vibrant economy, I think you're going to start to see movement to have a new system come in for younger people, not older people, but younger people, where part of their payroll tax goes to the equivalent of their own personal retirement account. Plenty of restrictions and things like that. But experience has shown in other countries and that you end up with that, even if you don't invest a penny in the stock market, just stick with bonds and CDs, over time you'll do better than what Social Security can deliver. So I think you're going to see a positive movement there. And on health care, the only way you're going to deal with that, the Medicare-Medicaid mess, is by putting more power, more money in the hands of patients rather than third parties, whether it's the government or large insurance companies. People get better deals than these insurers do, and so I think you're going to see a movement towards that. You get a little taste of it with the LASIK surgery for the eyes, Frank. That's not covered by insurance, and the real cost of that has gone down 60% over the last 20 years. And so you're paying far less than you would have if they made it part of the traditional insurance system. So I think you're going to see some very positive things happen. Power in the hands of patients, not third parties, getting a new system for younger people. And once markets see that we're starting to get our act together and getting growth again, as we did in the 80s and 90s, they'll buy our debt because they'll see we're creating an environment where we can service that debt. Right now, we're creating an environment where we're not going to be able to service that debt at an affordable cost in the future.
And the political environment, certainly something else that Fitch noted, and also, by the way, the possibility of another government shutdown coming up here pretty soon. But on the political environment, of course, you were a former Republican presidential candidate, and certainly following what's happening these days with President Trump, the front runner right now, facing these indictments and so forth. Give us your reaction to the latest news related to President Trump and what he's dealing with at the moment.
Well, the more they indict him, the more he becomes stronger because people...
Introducing Rich Valdez, America at Night, the podcast.
Welcome to the conversation, familia.
A perfect blend of news and entertainment, interviews and insights.
It's really just an expose on how messed up things are.
America's nighttime town hall whenever you want.
It's a huge problem that deserves a lot more attention.
Rich Valdez, America at Night. Follow the podcast wherever you listen.
See a lot of these indictments as political rather than truly criminal, and a lot of the things on what happened with the documents where he was careless, and I think that should have been treated civilly as a civil case with fines rather than trying to treat it as criminal. But so poisonous is the atmosphere today that everything has to become Armageddon. And so this new one, the latest indictment, I don't care what you think of Trump. It's very dangerous because it, in effect, puts it as a real threat to free speech in the First Amendment. That indictment, I think, is going to get tossed out pretty quickly, if not in the trial court, then in the appeals court. So I wish people would step back and realize, as you referred to earlier, with Social Security in the early 80s. Or what Ronald Reagan did with the House Speaker Tip O'Neill. Those two didn't like each other at all, but they realized you've got to sometimes sit down, get the mood of the voters, and get things done. And that's the kind of environment I wish we'd bring back today instead of this battle to the death on everything. And by the way, I don't think Joe Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee. We've talked about this before. There's going to be a real push. I don't know what the scenario will be to get your governor to be the Democratic nominee next year.
Very interesting. In the mix, you have the legal system here as well. And do you think President Trump will face any trial between now and the election?
I think the answer is, even if the prosecutors want to do it, they're not going to be able to do it because you have discovery. You've got appeals that you have to make. As I mentioned, some of those indictments, I think, are so flimsy they'll get thrown out. Others will come to full trial. But I think it's going to be very hard to get it done before the elections next year. And that's even in a normal process. You know, these things seem to take forever.
Certainly a lot of wild cards this time around, so we look forward to many more conversations with you. As far as the markets are concerned, it's been an up year so far, and of course an up day today, so we can all feel good about the Dow being up more than 400, bouncing back from last week's slide, and that uncertainty involving that Fitch downgrade and all of that. What's your gut feeling on where this market goes from here?
The market will probably, with all the cash around, do okay short term. But I think the market is also going to be facing some of the headwinds And also on the earnings side, the market has loved the earnings season because the earnings have done better than anticipated. But if you look year over year, they look good because people expected so little. But they haven't made much progress, and eventually that's going to catch up.
And we've heard
I don't like market timing. I think you see it through.
And on the economy, looks like the Fed has throttled back on the recession talk, and some of the other big banks have recently pulled back on their assessments on a recession here. So are we in for a soft landing, hard landing, no landing? What is your latest update on where this economy goes from here now?
Well, a lot of flyers feel that they have no landing, no takeoff. And but in terms of the economy, what I think you're going to see is that this new consensus is emerging. Oh, things are going to be okay. The consensus is always wrong. So I expect some turbulence ahead, not just because the consensus is usually wrong, but because a lot of people are over indebted. A lot of the excesses of the last 10 years of no interest rates are coming home to roost. A lot of debt has to be renegotiated. So I think that it's going to be a rough bounce. Whether the economic theologians call it a recession, I don't know. But it's going to feel like walking pneumonia. You're just not going to feel good about it.
All right, we'll feel it in our gut and feeling it already, despite no official proclamation yet. Certainly a lot of people are feeling it. Steve Forbes, thank you very much for taking the call this evening, and we look forward to many more conversations with you as we track what's happening here. Steve Forbes, CEO of Forbes Media, including Forbes magazine, former Republican presidential candidate, and his latest book, which is excellent, Inflation, What It Is, Why It Is Bad, and How to Fix It. Thank you very much for joining us live here this evening. Thank you very much.
Being with you, Frank. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Steve Forbes, for joining us live here. It is jarring to have a car accident and hard to think clearly when you're hurt. So my friend, attorney Clark Fielding of Fielding Law, has created something to help you. It's a guide called Be Prepared Before a Motor Vehicle Accident. The guide is one page, fits right there in your glove compartment, and gives you everything you need in case you're hurt in an accident. So go to ClarkTheSharkLaw.com and download your free one-page guide and keep it right there in your glove box, and put Clark Fielding's number in your phone, too, under the word accident. So all you have to do is dial the number when you need him. Tell your family and friends to do the same. So if you're hurt in an accident, call the one we all trust, attorney Clark Fielding, 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK. And download the Be Prepared Before a Motor Vehicle Accident Guide at ClarkTheSharkLaw.com. That's ClarkTheSharkLaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. 790 KBC welcomes the Gypsy Kings, featuring Nicholas Reyes, coming up to the Greek Theater August 12th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-790-5222. You get a pair of tickets for the show if you're caller 9, so call right now. Caller 9 wins, 1-888-790-5222. Winning day for the stock market. The Dow 407 points at the closing bell. We're back to 35,473. The S&P 500 moved up 40 at 4,518, and the NASDAQ gained 85 at 13,994. The yield in the 10-year note now 4.09%. Yep, hovering above 4%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates out there, which have been moving higher. Taking a look at the price of oil, it has been hovering above $80 a barrel. And that's been impacting Southern California gas prices in a big way. They've been moving up. Right now, crude oil down 43 cents, hovering up 43 cents at the moment, now at $82.37 a barrel, now above $82 a barrel here and after hours trading. And it looks like regular gas in Los Angeles now averages $5.16 a gallon, $5.48 the average price for premium, both 23 cents a gallon higher than where they were just a month ago. $5.56 now the average price for diesel. That diesel price now 42 cents a gallon higher than where it was a month ago. Taking a look at the cryptos now, we see a Bitcoin up 6 to 29,225, Ethereum up 1 at 1,827, and Doge at 7 cents. Taking a look at the price of gold of 60 cents at $1,970.60 an ounce. Among the movers today, shares of Monster Beverage moving up more than $3 to 58 and change, a jump of 6%. We are watching Tesla shares making a move today on the downside. Looks like one of their top executives will be leaving, Zachary Kirkhorn, announcing he's stepping down as chief financial officer. Campbell Soup shares moving lower. It has agreed to acquire Sovos Brands parent of pasta sauces and other foods sold under the brand names Rouse, Michelangelo's, and Noosa, in a deal with an enterprise value of about $2.7 billion, according to MarketWatch. Campbell's Soup paying $23 per Savo's share in cash. Savo's stock closed Friday at $18.02. And, the big news here in the trucking business, Yellow Corporation filing for bankruptcy over the weekend. Yell was the stock symbol on that one, down 30% after the trucking company filed for bankruptcy protection on Sunday. Unusually, the stock had rallied last week ahead of the expected announcement. It sort of had a meme-like performance. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. The homeless crisis appears to be getting worse out there. At last count, according to the L.A. Homeless Services Authority, an estimated 75,500 people were experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles County. Many people think the number's even higher than that. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass and Councilmember Katie Yaroslavsky met with hisses and boos over a housing plan on the west side recently. Some of the other headlines are quite shocking. Torrance man gets run over and robbed by homeless man he let sleep in his Torrance business parking lot. Homelessness has exploded in one California city, making it the land of milk and fentanyl, according to an activist. Oakland now creating an unlivable situation for residents as homeless population there explodes. Now we have a city workers' strike set for tomorrow. How is that going to impact things? Tackling this big issue for years, the Reverend Andy Bales, the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission in downtown Los Angeles, Skid Row. Andy Bales live with us here right now. Reverend Bales, thank you very much for taking the call, and take it from the top. Give us your assessment of things out there at this moment.
Well, thank you, Frank. Yes, we're in trouble. I said a few years ago we're past the tipping point, and although I believe our mayor, Karen Bass, wonderful mayor, working hard, doing more than any mayor in the past several mayoralships, she is fighting an uphill battle because of our neglect for so many years, and also because the harm reduction, housing first, that California doubled down on for a decade has caught up with our society, and we need to stop harm reduction, housing first as a status quo. And Mayor Karen Bass is calling for a vast network of interim housing, and I would call for that and much more. I would call for a FEMA-like disaster crisis, emergency, and immediate shelter for all who desire to have immediate triage shelter, and then innovative interim shelter and housing, not the slow to develop, very expensive, affordable housing that people are stuck on. And even our mayor is fighting an uphill battle against the activists and the people who believe in the myth of housing for everyone. But you and I know that housing for everyone that was attempted to be launched only housed a few and left the many on the streets. Murders of homeless people were up 47% year over year, and that was 1/3 by gangs, 1/3 by homeless on homeless, and 1/3 by the housed on homeless, which may have played out the other night when a man who was living in an RV had it engulfed in flames because somebody grew tired of him sitting in an RV in L.A. and threw some kind of incendiary device into it. We don't know the exact circumstances, but anything goes on our streets, unfortunately, and we have a long way to go to bring any kind of order to this complete disorder. I talked to a young lady who lived in an RV with no hookup, no water, no electric. She said a bucket was how she did her waste. She would dump the bucket in the streets, and that has played a toll on our ocean water and storm sewers. And we're allowing people to bring us to an unlivable situation in LA. And if we don't address it immediately, it's going to only continue to get worse.
On the live with the Reverend Andy Bales, the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission. When you first took that big job, the homeless situation was largely seen in downtown Los Angeles there at Skid Row, where your facility is, right? And Tell us how you've seen this situation explode over the years now to throughout the city.
Yeah, I actually thought it was manageable, that we could actually end Skid Row as we know it, and we could bring hope, and we could make it so that not one precious human being was left on our streets. So I have failed miserably in ending Skid Row. Not only failed miserably in ending Skid Row, but Skid Row encampments have spread throughout our county and city. It's hard not to find an encampment now in LA County, and I attribute this to failed policy carried out. Housing first, harm reduction policy doubled down only in California for the past 10 years, when we needed a multitude of strategies and approaches like the rest of our country has done. All we have to do is look to New York for a better model. They leave 3,400 people on the streets total, even though they have as many people devastated by homelessness. We leave over 50,000 people on our streets, and it just continues to get worse because we're stuck with the status quo. I was almost going to say we're stuck on stupid, but I'll try to be more polite and say we're stuck with a status quo that is a total failed policy, and it is in that last 10 years where street homelessness skyrocketed, and our housing first, harm reduction policy has failed. And not only that, Frank, but our county has lost its bearings. They are doing all of the above. They are taking out free meth pipes and handing them out on the streets. They are also taking Narcan or naloxone out and bringing back people from overdose. But they're also bringing out oxygen to keep people from getting brain damage while they're overdosed and while they wait for the Narcan or the naloxone to take effect. And so they're taking part in every aspect of the drugs, helping to deliver the drugs and enable people to use the drugs, and then helping to bring people back. They need to choose one side or the other of this. Do they keep cooperating with the cartels and the drug dealers in distributing, or do they advance recovery and save people's lives? You can't be on every side of an issue. You have to land somewhere. You have to have moral values that land somewhere, and I would land on the pro-life, helping people stay alive rather than helping people and enabling their death spiral of addiction.
You're live with the Reverend Andy Bales from the Union Rescue Mission, and certainly already in Oakland, which has seen a very ugly homeless situation, open-air drug markets there, of course, crime and lax camping regulation. I don't know if you saw the latest reports, but that city's been described as unlivable at this point, and many areas here are unlivable at this point. So what is it going to take to turn this around at this point?
It's going to take every hand on deck to declare a FEMA-like crisis. If this were a hurricane or tornado damage, we would all gather in one effort to bring order and to bring healthy life, to not leave people on the streets to suffer and die. We would bring immediate triage care to everyone on the streets, and we would not allow people to stay on the streets. We would provide options to immediately get people off the streets, and creative, innovative, affordable options for housing like 3D printed concrete homes, container homes, prefab homes, tiny homes, mobile homes in recovery communities preferably. And we would end the free-for-all of distributing meth pipes to be used on a combination of meth mixed with fentanyl, mixed with horse tranquilizer that is a deadly combination. And we wouldn't bring a government-funded injection site to the streets of Skid Row like our county supervisors and some city council are planning to do. Why would you add misery to a place that already is devastated by corralling and containment policy? Why would you bring more death to a place like Skid Row? We need to focus on recovery, not the distribution of drugs and the enablement and support and sustaining of cartels and their deadly entrepreneurship on the streets of Skid Row.
That's horrible. And it's heartbreaking for you to hear you say that you failed. I think everyone failed you, Reverend Bales. You took the point there, and yeah, I tell you, you command the utmost respect from all of us and what you've done there. And I know you're getting ready to retire soon. I hope to speak with you many more times between now and that happens in October. Is that when you'll be leaving Los Angeles?
I'm leaving December 31st, somewhere December 29th to 31st. And Mayor Bass assured me the other day that we're going to partner with recovery. I hope that she's able to courageously battle her foes that want to keep things status quo, and she does a partnership of a recovery program with Union Rescue Mission and other people who believe in complete turnarounds, miracles, recovery from addiction. And I hope that I hear from her soon and have a meeting and we launch a recovery movement that won't be stopped. And so I hope to continue to try to make a difference. But yes, if my goal when I came was to end Skid Row as we know it, I have fallen short. We have fallen short. You're right. It's not just me, but I have to tell you, maybe there's hope in a turnaround, but it better come soon if it's going to come in my time here.
Well, with our help, I hope, Reverend. Thank you very, very much for taking the call live with us here, and Godspeed in your important work. The Reverend Andy Bales, the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission in downtown Los Angeles. Thank you very much for joining us live here this evening.
Thank you, sir. And I'm relocating to Des Moines. I'm going to work with inner city kids to help them become resilient and avoid these kind of disasters in their life, and help them to be world changers with education and food program. And so I'm not retiring. I'm just relocating to try to continue to make a difference.
That is amazing. Well, we honor your service to this area and certainly support all of your efforts wherever you might go. So thank you very, very much for joining us here and sharing that important information with us tonight. This is 790 KABC. Folks, does your knee pain keep getting worse? How about that pain in your shoulder or hip or back? Don't let them tell you steroids and surgery are your only options. Take my advice now and call QC Kinetics. Frank Mottek here. It's QC Kinetics that can make that pain go away with all natural advanced regenerative medicine. They're helping people here every day with these amazing natural treatments that restore and repair your damaged joint tissue. It's like turning back the clock. Regenerative medicine uses concentrated healing agents from your very own body to stimulate that damaged tissue and joints so they work like they're supposed to, and there is zero downtime. QC Kinetics is the nation's leader in this exciting medical breakthrough. Patients here are getting real lasting relief and are saying no to surgery and drugs. If you have pain due to injuries or arthritis, this is a remarkable option that you need to check out. The consultation is absolutely free. Call QC Kinetics. Locations in Glendale, the city of Orange, Mission Viejo, and now also in Costa Mesa. The number is 213-997-PAIN. 213-997-PAIN. Again, that's 213-997-PAIN. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Homelessness. Now, let's talk about crime here in Los Angeles and throughout Southern California. You've seen the latest videos, especially that one with 3 robbers taking off with nearly $1 million worth of jewelry at a jewelry store, another smash and grab situation, one of the latest in Irvine. We're seeing it throughout Southern California these days. The crime wave continues. Joining us live now, the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member, longtime LAPD officer and still a reserve officer with more than 50 years of service, 55 years, I believe, of service to the City of Angels. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for taking the call here. And your reaction, first of all, to this ongoing crime wave here with the smash and grab robberies impacting retail stores out there.
Frank, I am not shocked. Retail is out of control. Retail theft is totally, completely out of control. I went to a Ralph's yesterday in the San Fernando Valley to get some medication. The medicine is all locked up, and there's no one there. So the place is closed. You can't get medicine after hours. It's become a situation that is completely out of control. And there was a recent video, and it's online. People can check that online, where an individual went into a store, and he had a trash can.
Yeah.
And he was loading the trash can, just cleaning off the shelves, just throwing them in the trash can, I mean, it was just absolutely, and people were telling him, stop. He kept doing it. Well, they finally decided to corral him, and they started beating him with a stick. He finally surrendered, but he was just walking in there, and they were trying to stop him. I mean, a huge trash can, just loading anything and everything from the shelves, just cleaning those shelves off, and he planned to walk out the store. This is what's happening. The numbers bear what we're seeing. These are the numbers that people are reporting. Arrests, for example, on theft, arrests are down 22 to 23, 81%. And when you have that type of situation where the crime is going up, a lot of people, when it comes to theft, they don't even make a report. Everything is judged by reports. Every time you look at a situation, was there a report? Was there a report? And I can't emphasize enough for your listeners, if you have retail and something happens, even though the police aren't going to arrest the individual, make that report. Those statistics are what they deploy the personnel with. And I know LAPD short and et cetera. I don't give excuses. The bottom line is you deserve better protection than you're receiving from the city of Los Angeles. And if you're a storekeeper, my wishes are with you. But people go in there blatantly stealing with the people, the clerk standing right there. In this particular case, they tried to stop. But, California's working on a law that's going to make it illegal for you as a storekeeper or an employee at a retail to try and stop someone. Make it illegal for you to try and stop someone who is stealing. So I suggest, just close the door, because you're going to get ripped off of anything and everything you got. Not only the high end, but just a retail store. It's absolutely incredible. But the reports need to be made to show how out of control it is, and it's really completely out of control. I mean, these reports reflect just a small number of the crimes that are taking place, and it needs to be done. I can't emphasize enough. If you're a storekeeper, make those reports. It's critical.
Absolutely. It should be noted that situation involving the 7-Eleven there, that happened in Stockton, and certainly getting international attention at this point, and refocusing what's happening here in California as the crime wave continues. Now, you're a former L.A. City Councilman. Let me ask you this. It looks like we may have the first city workers' strike since 1980 tomorrow, a one-day strike anyway. What's going to happen tomorrow?
Well, it seems like the motion picture industry and the other industries are pursuing this. I know that they haven't resolved the police contract as of yet. The police officers, fortunately, are dedicated. They're going to continue working without a contract. This is not unusual. It's been a long time since we've had this kind of work stoppage by city employees. SEIU, their labor union, obviously is not happy with negotiations taking place at City Hall. I mean, they talk about all this money, billions and billions of dollars are spending on homeless, but they don't want to pay the city employees who are doing the job that they do every single day. This is outrageous. I mean, we're throwing, and I listened to Reverend Bales. I support him. God bless him for what he's done. And he's finally going to retire and go to a happier place, I hope. But the fact of the matter is, we're throwing every single dollar into the homeless situation, and we forget about the dedicated city employees that are out there doing the job every single day. Whatever the conditions are, whatever the weather conditions are, whatever the traffic, whatever it is, they're there. They're dedicated people. They deserve to get a decent contract. Same with the police and the fire and these other municipal employees. But the mayor goes to Sacramento, gets money from the federal government. They're talking about billions upon billions for the homeless. Well, give some of that money to the workers who are trying to keep the streets clean and do what they need to do to keep Los Angeles safe. You can't neglect your municipal employees, and that's basically what's happening. That's why they're doing this one-day work stoppage.
The Honorable Dennis Zine, thank you very much for taking the call on these big issues facing the City of Angels, and we salute your service once again. The Honorable Dennis Zine, former Los Angeles City Council member, longtime LAPD sergeant, and current reserve officer. Thank you very much for joining us here tonight, live on 790 KABC.